Hi, and welcome to Tech Tips Tablet Press Setup Series with Techceuticals. This is Mike Towsey, and welcome today. We're going to finish installing our punches and start getting this machine set up a little bit better. So far we've covered a lot of ground, but right now what we want to do is finish with installing the punches. And what we're going to do to begin with is we always use a punch cleaning brush. Now this has already been done, where we clean out the punch socket using this brush to make sure that the socket's clean. Then we'll take a clean lower punch. We'll lubricate the punch either with an oil or grease. This is a food grade thin oil, and we install the punch into the punch socket and make sure that it fits freely and moves up and down in the punch socket very nice, and moves up and in and out of the die smoothly. Then what we can do is install the punch plug to prevent the punch from coming back out, and make sure that's installed properly. Into the machine. And then what we're going to do next is, now that we've got the punch installed, is we can finish putting the punch retainer in. Now what a lower punch retainer is it's nothing more than a plug or a plunger that puts tension on the side of the punch. And the reason for doing that is it minimizes the deflection, or the amount of bounce or chatter a punch has when it's traveling through the cams. By putting a lower punch retainer in, this minimizes that chatter and maximizes our weight control. So once I put that in place, I'm simply going to snug up the spring or the retainer, make sure it's good and snug, and all I want out of that is that it does not allow the punch to be too tight, but it doesn't allow it to fall freely. Once I've accomplished that, I'm really done now with my lower section. I'm going to tighten that up, my lower punch guard, and now I can turn the press. And this is a step that I always want to take, is when I check the machine out, I want to make sure that I rotate the machine and make sure it's free and there's no binding. If there's binding, then I can definitely associate that tightness with setting up of those lower punches. Then I can go back and double check my cam alignment and double check and make sure nothing's too tight. Once I've accomplished that, then I can begin to again lubricate and load my upper punches. When I do that, I'm going to make sure that I've cleaned them out properly prior. I lubricate the upper punch the same way, either using an oil or a grease, and make sure that that punch is free in the punch socket and moving smoothly. Once I've completed the whole complement of tooling, installation of all the punches, then what I'm going to do again is go through the same set. I'm going to always rotate the machine to make sure that there's no binding or no tight spots in the rotation of the turret. And that way now I know that all of my uppers are in place and set up properly. So now we've got our uppers and lowers set up, and you can see that I've also indicated on the machine that this is the high spot. That is, we put the drop indicator or the dial indicator on the die table and rotated it to find the highest location. And every machine is like this. Some are better than others, but most machines have a high spot, and that's where we want to locate or set up our feed frame. And basically, the feed frame is set up with three components. The feeder itself, where the powder flows in and moves through these chevrons and moves in and out to fill the die. Now on the bottom of the feed frame, or at this end of the feed frame, we have a takeoff blade that guides the tablet down the tablet chute, and on the other side we have a weight control scraper blade. And we look at the condition of the scraper blade. This is a must to make sure that this is in good shape. If it's not, we change it and change it regularly. There's a spring that holds down the blade to make sure the blade floats, because remember the table floats a little bit. So we need to make sure that this table or the scraper blade actually floats on the table. The next thing that I do is when I'm installing the feeder is I actually want to make sure that I have a certain amount of clearance between the bottom of the feed frame and the top of the table. For this purpose here, I'm going to use a piece of paper, because a piece of paper is typically about 3/1000 of an inch thick. Now usually I would use a feeler gauge, and feeler gauges are just nothing more than pre-measured pieces of steel that we know that has a given clearance. So we can use the feeler gauge, or for demonstration purposes today I'm going to use the paper. So I'll slide the feed frame in place. Lock it down. Double check and make sure that that is snug, but not so tight that it won't move. In other words, I don't want metal to metal contact. I don't want the base of this feeder touching the top of the die table. Once that's locked down in place and everything's tightened up, then once again I can remove that paper, I can rotate the machine and make sure that we're set up. So that's a very quick explanation of feeder setting, but basically again all we want to make sure is that we have a minimum clearance, but we don't want the clearance so high that any granulation escapes. There will always be some fines that escape no matter what, because some particles are smaller or thinner than the thickness of a piece of paper. So typically we will have some leakage between the base of the feed frame and the top of the table. That's normal on most any type of tablet press. So anytime I complete setting up a section, I'm going to once again rotate the machine, make sure that nothing's tight, nothing's bound, that I'm ready to go, that everything's free, and now I'm getting close to setting up the hopper and putting powder on the machine for our next step. So once again, thanks for joining our Tech Tips tablet press setup series. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.